The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the lake, its reflection shimmering like 1,000 tiny diamonds. I stood by the window, the cool glass against my forehead, watching as the last of the day's light faded. The house was alive with the echoes of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strumming of a guitar somewhere in the distance. But inside, my heart was a storm, a tempest of emotions I had always tried to keep at bay. I turned, my gaze catching Jason's from across the room. He was leaning against the doorway, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. There was something about him, an allure that was both dangerous and irresistible. His smile, always a little too knowing, played at the corners of his lips as he pushed off from the doorframe and walked towards me. "Emma," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You look like you're 1,000,000 miles away." I forced a smile, my fingers nervously playing with the stem of my wine glass. "Just thinking," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, the space between us charged with an electricity that was palpable. "About what?" His question was innocent enough, but his eyes, those deep blue eyes, told a different story. They were asking for something more, something unspoken yet understood. Before I could answer, the room seemed to empty, the others drawn away by the promise of a bonfire down by the lake. Jason's hand brushed mine, a touch so fleeting yet so deliberate. "Come with me," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. We found ourselves in the library, a room filled with the scent of old books and leather, a sanctuary from the revelry outside. The door clicked shut behind us, and the silence enveloped us like a thick fog. Jason's presence filled the room, his scent mingling with the musty aroma of the books. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the turmoil within. He moved towards me, his steps deliberate, his gaze never leaving mine. "You've always been so composed, Emma," he said, his voice a velvet caress. "But tonight, I see something different in your eyes." I swallowed hard, the wine glass still in my hand, now feeling like an anchor. "Maybe it's just the reflection of the fire outside," I managed, my voice betraying the tremor of my nerves. Jason chuckled softly, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "Or maybe," he continued, stepping so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, "it's because you're finally allowing yourself to feel." His hand reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, tilting my face up to meet his. The touch was electric, igniting a fire that had been smoldering beneath my carefully constructed facade. "Jason, we shouldn't—" My protest was weak, even to my own ears, drowned out by the rush of my pulse. He leaned in, his lips hovering just above mine, his breath mingling with mine. "Why not, Emma? When has following the rules ever made you truly happy?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. My mind raced, battling between the rational voice that had guided my life and the wild, untamed part of me that yearned for something more, something forbidden. Before I could respond, his lips met mine, a kiss that was both a question and an answer. It was gentle, yet insistent, pulling me into a whirlpool of sensations I had denied myself for so long. My body responded, my hand dropping the wine glass, the sound of it hitting the carpet muffled by the rush of blood in my ears. We pulled apart breathless, the reality of what just happened settling like dust. My light green eyes, usually so guarded, now reflected a storm of guilt and exhilaration. Jason's expression was unreadable, a mix of triumph and concern. I need to think," I whispered, stepping back, the cool air now a stark contrast to the heat that had enveloped us. He nodded, his gaze still intense. "Take all the time you need, Emma. But remember, life isn't just about what we should do, but what we want to do." I turned away, my fingers brushing over the spines of the books as if seeking some ancient wisdom to guide me. The door opened with a soft creak, and I stepped out into the hallway, the sounds of the party now a distant murmur. My steps were slow, deliberate as I made my way back to the gathering, each step echoing the weight of my internal conflict. The night was still young, but for me, it felt like a pivotal moment had passed, one that would either bind me closer to the life I knew or set me on a path of no return. The cool night air did little to calm the storm inside me as I rejoined the others by the bonfire. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows that mirrored the turmoil in my heart. I took a seat on one of the logs, my eyes scanning the crowd but avoiding Jason's gaze, which I could feel like a physical touch from across the fire. My husband, Mark, was engrossed in conversation with his cousin, his laughter ringing out, oblivious to the chaos within me. I watched him, his familiar features softened by the firelight, and felt a pang of guilt so sharp it was almost physical. Here was the man I had vowed to love and honor, yet my actions tonight had betrayed those very promises. The warmth of the fire was comforting, yet it felt like a mockery of the heat that had consumed me in the library. I sipped my wine, now lukewarm, trying to regain some semblance of control. But every time I glanced up, my eyes would inadvertently meet Jason's, his look a silent question, a challenge, a promise of more. The night wore on, and the crowd began to thin as people retired to their rooms or wandered off to enjoy the lake under the stars. I found myself alone with Mark, who finally noticed my silence. "You've been quiet tonight, Em," he said, his voice filled with concern as he sat beside me, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile, the weight of my secret pressing down on me. "Just tired," I lied, the words tasting bitter. "It's been a long day." He kissed my temple, his touch gentle and loving, and I felt another wave of guilt. "Let's go to bed then," he suggested, standing up and offering his hand. I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm, so different from the electric touch of Jason's. As we walked back to our room, each step felt like a betrayal, a step further away from the person I thought I was. Once inside, Mark started getting ready for bed, his movements routine and comforting. I stood by the window, the moon casting a silver glow over the lake, its tranquility a stark contrast to my inner turmoil. "Emma?" Mark's voice broke through my reverie. "Are you coming to bed?" I turned, my heart heavy. "In a bit," I murmured, needing space to think, to breathe. Alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the pattern of the quilt. The room was silent except for the distant sound of the lake lapping against the shore. My mind replayed the kiss, the forbidden thrill, and the subsequent guilt. Was this what I wanted? To unravel my life for a moment of passion? The door creaked open and I looked up, expecting Mark, but it was Jason. His silhouette was framed by the hallway light, his expression unreadable in the dimness. "Emma," he whispered, stepping inside and closing the door softly behind him. "We need to talk." I stood, my heart racing, a mix of fear and desire. "Jason, you shouldn't be here," I said, my voice a mix of warning and longing. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "I know," he admitted, his voice low, "but I can't stop thinking about what happened. About you." The air between us was charged, the tension palpable. "This is wrong," I whispered, but my body betrayed my words, leaning slightly towards him. "Is it?" he countered, his hand reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Or is it the most honest thing we've ever done?" The touch was gentle, yet it sent a shiver through me. I stepped back, needing space, needing clarity. "I need time, Jason. Time to think, to understand what this means." He nodded, his gaze intense. "I'll give you space, Emma, but remember, life is short, and we're not promised tomorrow." With that, he left, the door closing with a soft click, leaving me in the silence of my own making. I sat back down, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The night stretched on, each moment filled with the echoes of my internal debate. Could I continue this affair, knowing the potential destruction it could bring? Or would the guilt and the fear of losing everything I had built with Mark be too much? The library kiss was not just a moment of passion, it was a fork in the road, and I was standing at its precipice, unsure which path to take. The next morning, the sun rose over the lake, casting long shadows through the windows of the house. I woke up alone, Mark having already left for an early morning fishing trip with some of the relatives. The room felt too quiet, the silence amplifying the chaos in my mind. I dressed quickly, the fabric of my clothes feeling like a second skin, constricting and uncomfortable. I needed air, needed to clear my head. Stepping outside, the morning was crisp, the dew still clinging to the grass, making each step feel like a squishy betrayal of the earth beneath. I walked towards the lake, my steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing the turmoil within. As I reached the water's edge, I saw Jason. He was sitting on a large rock, his back to me, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. My heart skipped a beat, the sight of him stirring a mix of emotions I wasn't ready to face. I considered turning back, but something compelled me forward. "Morning!" I called out, my voice sounding more composed than I felt. He turned, his face lighting up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, Emma. Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head, joining him on the rock, careful to keep a distance. "Too much on my mind," I admitted, looking out at the calm water, its surface a deceptive mirror of tranquility. Jason shifted closer, his thigh brushing against mine, sending a jolt through me. "Last night," he began, his voice trailing off as if unsure how to continue. I cut him off, my voice firm. "Jason, we can't do this. It was a mistake." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Was it, though? Emma, I've never felt this alive, this connected with someone." The sincerity in his voice was disarming, but I steeled myself. "It doesn't matter how we feel. There are consequences, Jason. Real, painful consequences." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the water. "I know. But what if we could find a way? What if we could be happy?" The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of possibility and guilt. "And what about Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What about the life we've built?" Jason's hand reached for mine, his touch gentle, pleading. "I'm not asking you to leave him, not now. I'm asking you to consider what you want, what you truly want." I pulled my hand away, the warmth of his touch lingering. "I need to think about what's right, not just what feels good." He stood up, his figure tense. "Think about it, Emma. Think about what you truly want," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and hope. I watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller as he headed back to the house. The morning light was harsh now, illuminating the reality of our situation with unforgiving clarity. I sat there, the rock cold beneath me, the water lapping at the shore in a rhythm that seemed to mock the chaos in my heart. The day passed in a blur. I avoided Jason, spending time with the other guests, engaging in mundane conversations that felt like a lifeline to normalcy. Mark returned from fishing, his face lit up with stories of the catch, his joy a stark contrast to the storm within me. I smiled, nodded, and played the part of the loving wife, all the while feeling like an imposter in my own life. As the evening approached, the family decided to have a small gathering by the lake, a farewell to the summer house before everyone returned to their daily lives. The setting was picturesque, the sun setting once again, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air, but for me, it was a cacophony of guilt and confusion. Mark was by my side, his arm around me, his touch now a reminder of the life I was risking. I glanced around, my eyes inevitably finding Jason, who was watching me from a distance, his expression unreadable. The tension between us was a palpable force, drawing us together even as we tried to keep apart. The climax of the evening came when Mark, in a jovial mood, suggested a toast. To family, to love, and to the memories we've made here, he said, raising his glass. Everyone echoed his sentiment, glasses clinking in a symphony of unity. But as I raised my glass, my eyes met Jason's across the fire. His gaze was intense, a silent plea or perhaps a challenge. My hand trembled slightly, the wine in my glass quivering. Then, in a moment that felt like it was suspended in time, Jason stepped forward, his voice cutting through the cheerful noise. "And to honesty," he added, his eyes locked on mine. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mark, sensing something amiss, looked between us, his brow furrowing. "Honesty?" he echoed, his voice tinged with confusion. The world seemed to slow down. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears, each thud a reminder of the betrayal I had committed. Jason's gaze was unwavering, and I knew this was the moment of reckoning. "Mark!" I started, my voice barely a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my confession. I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. "Mark, I kissed Jason last night." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's face, once lit with the joy of the evening, now fell into a mask of confusion and hurt. His grip on his glass tightened, the jovial atmosphere around us dissipating like smoke. "You what?" His voice was a mix of disbelief and pain, his eyes searching mine for some sign that this was a cruel jest. "It was a mistake," I said quickly, my voice trembling. "I was overwhelmed, confused, but it happened." Jason stood there, his expression now one of regret, mixed with a strange kind of relief. The others at the gathering had quieted, their attention now drawn to our small, tense circle. Mark looked between us, his gaze hardening. "Why, Emma? Why did you do this?" Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.